Get in there.
And we're waiting to see if we're over at LinkedIn yet.
LinkedIn.
Yeah,
It's not LinkedIn. It's
Yeah,
LinkedIn.
I bet we are.
Yeah. Well,
Let's do it, Glenn.
Let's go for it. Welcome, everybody. Hello. It's your Wednesday fix of Hear the People. I am Glenn Martin, co-founder and CEO of Nevermind the Job Spec. And I have my amazing co-host with me, Katrina Collier, author,
Hello.
facilitator, talent workshop deliverer. I mean, the list goes on, but let's just stop there.
I do a little bit too much.
Yeah. Over to you, Katrina, to introduce our amazing guest.
Oh, I know. I'm so excited to have Liz Lembke on the show today because we were talking about this, oh my gosh, months ago.
Exactly. Like it's the best laid plan.
Controversial topic that we're going to talk about, but I can't wait. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Liz.
Excited to be here.
Talent Navigator. What is the Talent Navigator? I don't understand. Please explain.
Chief Talent Navigation. So here, what's going on in the world today, and how do we navigate in terms of how are we staffing, how are we building our organizations, and how are we delivering on the premise? Careers look good here, and so we have to navigate what's going on in the environment, what's going on with our business, but particularly what's going on with our people. So I help companies do that.
I love that. I love the navigation piece of that as well, because it says it talks to a journey. And I think sometimes hiring managers think hiring is start and stop. It's like bang, bang.
Yep.
And then the next bit is onboarding, bang, bang. And the next bit is career path management, bang, bang, like that. But actually,
and they forget pre-boarding, the really important part to get people to actually start these days.
Whereas you're kind of, you're
what
talking
do you need
to
a
that
computer
journey.
Actually, one on your start date.
What's on your head, though? I think you'll need to explain this. Because
so those who know me know that I'm also known as the devil's advocate for talent, and this is the Winter Wonderland edition.
Love that. Love that. Devil's advocate.
Devil's advocate.
That
topic.
Yeah,
that sets the show up nicely, I think.
Absolutely. I do call myself a soapbox psychologist. As a talent developer, we have to get on that soapbox. Katrina has seen me on my soapbox a couple of times.
Like you on your soapbox. Well, you need to be on your soapbox today. Hello, anybody who happens to be watching over on LinkedIn. We really struggled to see comments and comment. Try and say that 3 times fast. So feel free to come over. There is a link to Crowdcast. Feel free to come over here because we can see your comments. And hello to everyone who is live here. Please add your comments. So today's show topic started because you and I had a conversation, which feels like 390 years ago. It wasn't. It was actually at some point in this year. I don't know why anyone's stressed with the roller coaster that's going on. But we were talking about, I also think recruiters should be very much involved in this, but just how essential it is for us to not hire someone if we can't keep them, which was your phrase, which I have now stolen with permission and credit every time because I'm a very good person. I give credit. I just love it. So explain more. How did that come about? What led you to that obvious thinking that we seem to have forgotten somehow?
Yeah, well, and it's really funny because it's like these things of like, what are your principles behind how do you deal with talent, and how do you as an organization deal with talent? So in my former role as a talent director, one of our first things was careers look good here. So it was then that piece to say, how do we actually deliver on that? And I was in automotive.
Yeah.
So one of our key questions was, would we be able to have this position if we had a 20% downturn? That was every position got that same question, because if we were not able to survive, this was then where we took different alternatives to say, okay, what can we borrow? What can we, is there someone where we can do job enlargement and job enrichment until we can truly say in a 20% downturn, we would 100% need this position. And then we would staff. First piece. Second piece was, and where does this position go?
Yeah.
So here, really seeing every position that we staffed as an opportunity for someone's development, because people learn stuff in their roles, learning via experience, and that's what we want. So how do you actually have a good talent pipeline which has a variety of experiences, knows different parts of the business, et cetera, so that you have internal talent that you can hire in. Supplemented also to say, okay, here, if we don't have this talent, what is kind of like a unique, great position that our profile is a success profile that would really help. So it really started with that philosophy of, you know, if we're going to say careers look good here, well, geez, that means for us in HR and also as a business, we can't just do like talent management as window dressing. We actually have to understand, you know, here, okay, workforce planning on the one side, but also what do people want to do? And then how can we create those opportunities?
And even putting aside like talent management and how do we look and employer branding, it's that we play with people's lives, isn't it?
Yes, 100%.
There's that horror story of the person. Now, I can't remember which company, so I'm actually not intentionally not mentioning the company. I can't remember. Menopause brain. It's wonderful.
It happens.
But this poor guy sold up everything in South America to move to this company, which is in Northern Europe. I remember that much. Sold up everything, and 3 days before he was due to start, the offer was rescinded. Yes. Now, I can't believe a company isn't that aware that that's going to happen. I mean, that man probably can't rebuy because he'll have lost on the market. So he won't be able to buy his house back. He won't be able to get his car back. He's lost. And the company, of course, won't have to pay him anything because he didn't start yet. And that's just wrong.
It's so wrong because it's seen as a transactional, exactly to your point, we mess with people's life. Every time we say, okay, here's a career opportunity, we're asking someone to evaluate what's your current situation, what's going on with your spouse, significant other, what will this mean for your kids? It's not just, ooh, this job is interesting. I'll do easy click apply per, Glenn, what is it called?
LinkedIn.
I don't think I've ever heard you share that one before, and considering how long I've known you, that's quite hysterical.
It's a classic. Trust me, the look on the people's faces in the audience when they were like, "Is this a new tool?" I mean, I don't know. I mean, kind of, can we get on it? Is it subscription based?
So to that point, you know, when we're asking people, we also have a responsibility as recruiters and businesses to say, okay, if they say yes, how are we beholden to them? So at the same, you know, kind of where we get upset when someone doesn't actually come in and onboard, you know, this was one of our biggest problems in India with staffing. It's the same, you know, reverse. If we rescind an offer, what compensation or what are we doing to help that person? Yeah.
I mean, it makes me sick thinking about that. Just that one individual.
Yeah.
And I'm not even involved. I don't even know who he is. It just makes me feel sick that we can do that to somebody.
I think the piece that I really like, Liz, is you mentioned there about the philosophy around hiring, which speaks to a greater understanding of the impact on the individual, the team, the business, as opposed to the process of hiring. So what Katrina's example there about, you know, the guy kind of, you know, selling up everything ready to move, that company clearly has a process for hiring and have a philosophy for hiring. And I love the fact that you kind of gave that example around, okay, what would happen if now companies post-pandemic should be still thinking what if scenarios, so we can kind of have a philosophy around hiring, but equally a philosophy, and I think we'll touch upon this around, okay, once that individual's in the business, we've all heard the old saying, you know, kind of first, you know, last in, first out, which is just hideous. How did you go about fostering a philosophy of hiring as opposed to just going in and just setting up some processes, which we could do pretty straightforward?
Well, and it was really interesting and hard at first because it was like, oh, you know, these are talent development, these are recruiting, and we had to like get people away from the segmentation, which in my opinion is completely arbitrary. Someone decided that there are these different departments, but at the end of the day, people want to go somewhere where they feel like they can grow and have impact. And so that was the first thing, is break down the stupid arbitrary barriers between the different functional expertise areas. And then we just came up with talent principles, and we said, okay, here, if careers look good, we're here. It means first, everyone gets the development they need. So it doesn't matter if you were an intern. It didn't matter if you were on the shop floor. Everyone got development. So that was the first one. The second one is that variety of experiences makes a huge difference. So how do we get those to the people as part of the job design, but also at the manager responsibility. And the third one, and really the most important one, was every development, every new staff, everything you do with a person, if there's not a meaningful, impactful conversation actually had with that person, all the rest is fluff.
Yeah.
So it was
Ooh,
really
can
about
you
accountability.
Can you expand on that one or give us an example of what you mean? Ooh,
So one of the things, the first 2 years I noticed, I was a talent manager and I had these awesome processes, and I was called the global template manager because every year we got a new template. And then the second year I was like, okay, and what happened? Well, I didn't talk to him. Well, I didn't talk to her. Well, who? And I'm like, does the person actually know they're being developed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or do they just think it's part of their job, basically,
Yes,
as opposed
exactly.
to, yeah, okay, cool, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just like, if you're not actually talking to your people, if you're not understanding what they want to do, how they want to grow, what's challenging for them, hello, how are you being a leader? I just really didn't understand it, but it was a good message.
Yeah.
Global template manager. Does this go back to that we don't develop our managers themselves? Like, so often people are put in the role, or is it people are too busy, or like, what's the latest lame excuse for not developing?
Yeah, well, Katrina, I think you said it. What's the latest lame excuse? And I think this is the thing of, how are you having meaningful conversations? And we can have a meaningful conversation about development. I can have a meaningful conversation with my mentor, someone else. And if I'm not actually going into that brave space to have these conversations around how I can grow, what I'm doing well, where might be areas of interest or curiosity that I could dive into, then people go back to, well, I don't know what I want to do. Maybe I need to take an additional language training or Excel training, or, and they think that that's development, rather than, if you don't understand where the person is and where they'd like to go and grow, then it's,
Does that come back to they want to own their people as well?
Yeah.
You see that like with internal mobility, don't you? It's like, well, I own Liz, so I'm not going to train her because she might go over there.
Yes.
And then I'll lose her.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Well, and this was one of the biggest things. That was, I was mentioning one of the challenges was this conundrum of what functional technical area, but the other one was exactly that, the protectionism of business units and individual managers of, we'll send our best people outside of the company. Good luck.
Yeah. And then we'll hire in new people who cost more.
Exactly.
Has someone ever worked out the cost of that? There needs to be a cost.
There is.
The cost is of holding onto your people.
Dealing with egos. Because this is the thing I'd say, if people's careers aren't getting developed, they're going to leave. And then you're going to lose your best person anyway. Yeah. So wouldn't it be better as you're the fosterer of that best talent? And so it was really that piece to say, okay, here, who owns the talent as a really key question. And we said the individual manager does not own the talent. Maybe they have the position, but the talent, first belongs to the person because they're going to make a decision anyway. But if they're in an environment where they feel motivated, cared for, and fulfilled, then the talent truly belongs to the organization, and it's about our responsibility. We say it, here, employee-led, manager-driven, organizationally championed. If those things aren't aligned, then exactly right. You're going to frustrate people. They're not going to see any career development because, my best person, I can't let them leave. You can never let your best person leave. Okay. So what are you going to do about it? When you can come up with some options.
Yeah. Is there, in your experience, Liz, is there a kind of perhaps a focus on that high performing talent because they're very vocal about what they want? Managers, leaders tend to sort of gravitate towards having conversations with them to kind of keep them, manage expectations, and perhaps don't set up the kind of safe spaces to empower others to have a similar conversation. So individuals that are possibly less forthcoming with what they want. And those individuals end up then getting given training and development that perhaps they are being told would be good for them, as opposed to actually owning and discussing what they would like and how they see their kind of career path navigating. I've observed that myself. I was curious as to whether that's something you'd experienced as well.
Well, one of the things I say, is like the squeaky wheel always gets oiled, but who does your business actually really depend upon can be very different. And it was one of our biggest challenges that our functional technical, our amazing specialists were completely ignored because it's like, oh, they're fine. They're quiet. They're fine. And it's like, yeah, no, they're not. They need a different development. They only see like, okay, I have only had 2 directions that I can go and I don't want to be a leader. But what does development look like for me? So exactly to your point, Glenn, it's so important. And it will be ignored quite often because the solid performers and the specialists, they're performing at such a high level. We assume they're happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's kind of, and sometimes they don't want to, certainly those individuals that are a little quieter about what they want and less forthcoming, they don't necessarily want to talk about that in a monthly one-to-one or something like that. They don't feel like it's a balanced dynamic of kind of power, if you know what I mean, in that sort of scenario. They possibly might want a situation where it's just more of a coffee chat or just a, kind of conversation to the side where they can feel a bit more free to express what they're looking for. And then, perhaps real leaders can see the value in that. Managers might see that's time consuming and what am I going to get out of it?
Yeah.
And it's kind of that mindset shift to every conversation you have with the people in your team is valuable.
So well said.
You've just got to kind of look for for the value for them, not for you.
Yeah. Well, and isn't it funny? Like I always said this, like we always find time for a quality spill. Why can't we find time for having conversations with our people?
Yeah, it's awesome.
True. Well, everyone's busy.
Yeah.
So bringing this back around, because actually what we're talking about is about the conversation. I feel that recruiters in the intake strategy session, job brief, whichever you would like to call it, chapter 5, should be asking this question, your question. Mind you, I've just said fall out in a downturn. I haven't said a 20% downturn. I kind of like that, adding that. But why do you think they should ask that kind of a question at that point? I mean, so many are scared to ask the question, let's be honest. There's a lot of, unfortunately, people pleasing. The thing I always want to address with the work I do, like the people pleasing, you need to be pushing back and setting boundaries. But what's the benefit to the recruiter doing that? Because in a way, they could almost take a job away from themselves. So maybe they don't want to do that. But
well, this is, I love it.
Questions in that question,
because it's such a philosophy question of how do you see your role? Do you see your role as an order taker? And you just get a laundry list of things that are completely unrealistic, but you've taken the order. And so, gosh darn it all to heck, you are going to find that squirrely unicorn. And then they'll say, I don't know. They're really not that great. Find a couple more.
Actually, that's not really what I wanted.
Yeah, exactly.
If you want to be an order taker, go to Pizza Hut. Can't remember who I stole that one from.
That's cute. I love it.
I did steal that one as well.
That's a really good one.
Steve Levy. I'll have definitely stolen that one from someone.
It's making
Thanks,
me a little
Audra,
hungry,
for the compliments for Glenn. I also thought I looked lovely today, but that's okay. I'm sorry.
We are all feeling
very
great.
stylish.
I mean, it is really quite in sync.
You're in green as well.
I am. I'm just in light.
That's
exactly.
Hilarious. Yeah.
That's funny.
So the really weird part is Glenn and I jumped on a live the other. We did a recording too. We were both wearing orange. Yeah. It was like we're not talking and going, "What are you wearing today?"
No, you're not like your 13-year-old middle school selves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We need to coordinate.
Exactly.
Right time. But anyway, back to the
coming
question.
back.
Because I want to see more pushback. Like with all the work I do, it's always about pushback, ask more questions, get more curious, And I just think when we remember that, we're playing with people's lives and, that one person's example. Yeah. So is it then that they should ask that question in the intake or?
For me, So the intake together with the hiring manager would be that first part is like, let's have a conversation and please do not do email ping pong or within our ATS ping pong, but let's have an actual conversation. And what I like to, exactly. How are you not necessarily challenging because it's a great opportunity that we're talking through. So you want to get in the great zone of like, ooh, you got a position approved, yeehaw. Exactly. We want to hire. But really having a conversation about what is this person? What's their role? What would they be doing? Where would they be growing? And then how would they, and here would this position exist if the business goes sour, and if the business doesn't go and the business goes sour, what other options would you explore internally or also externally to cover this? Because that way you're actually helping the manager lead. Because I mean, goodness gracious,
true.
These last couple of years, the managers have had to flex in ways they didn't know that they needed to. And so by having these conversations in a safe space with the recruiter who's going to help you find that awesome person or candidates, you're actually getting a great trust baseline between the two of you.
And then it gives you the option to say, let's not hire a salaried employee.
Yep.
If we really don't think, let's get in which I hate, fixed term contract, we'll get in a contractor. Their daily rate covers the risk. That's the point. But I think you're right. And also, if anyone's listening and you are not having conversations with your hiring managers when you get a job, stop it.
Yes, exactly. All
if you
three
don't
of us
understand
agrees.
why, get onto my collective and I will soon explain to you why. But oh my God. Sophie Power, if it's a new to the business role, I always ask, have we tested the hypothesis that this role, in brackets with the right hire in place, will work to make the manager reflect on whether we've got enough work to keep them occupied, literally? Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah. I'm going to play devil's advocate here, Liz. In so much as
borrow the headdress.
It's wandering over.
Yeah,
it's a banana tree behind you.
I think this is probably more from kind of agency side. That this is my kind of mindset. You're kind of almost trained to be a specialist, right? You need to be a specialist. You need to know your vertical, your market, your industry sector. And that's not necessarily conducive to going into an intake session and listening, because you've been trained to illustrate your knowledge and your credibility, which can sometimes force the conversation down a particular pathway. And you're not open to active listening there, because I'm not being funny, if agency side, if I sat in a whole intake session and said a couple of things, I would have walked out with my manager and be like, what was that? You didn't ask any questions. You didn't ask any real questions. You sort of pitch all the different clients that we were working with, all the different placements you've made prior to this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I know that may not translate directly into kind of in-house, but I do feel there's also an element of TA recruitment needing to prove their worth and establish their credibility. And perhaps that might not set the boundaries or set the foundations for a really kind of open conversation. And I wonder what advice you might give kind of recruiters to kind of be calm.
Can you explain that last bit in another way, though? What do you mean? Do you mean they shouldn't push back because then they're not showing their worth? I'm not.
Yeah, I think it's kind of it's trying to find that balance between not going in there, telling the hiring manager what the market's like, how they should hire, what they should hire, what to expect, etc., without finding out what the hiring manager knows already. So you don't go into it assuming they know nothing and you're the expert. And you kind of almost force that conversation down a particular track, as opposed to what you're advocating is active listening, but actually active listening with a view that if they say something that, they have an opinion on the market, you can challenge then with your knowledge.
Yeah, God, I'm definitely not advocating. I'm definitely not advocating you telling. I mean, God, that's why I run my workshops the way I do with design thinking.
Yeah.
We don't want to tell people what to do. They don't like it. But I'm actually saying,
I get that.
Have the knowledge, ask questions. Like you should be asking, and then you can weave it into the conversation. But you don't tell anybody what to do. Just remember what you were like as a teenager. If you want to tell anybody.
My point being is sometimes recruiters and talent acquisition folks are trained in a certain way.
Yeah.
And what advice would you give them to kind of go almost against that natural inclination of training to be open to active listening, asking questions, and then feeling empowered to challenge when they feel like perhaps that might not be the right pathway for a hiring manager?
I love this question because I think it's so important. And because it's, when do we actually go to agencies? We go to agencies when we can't figure it out internally. And we're like, okay, we need some expertise and need some expertise help here. But we're not completely blind. We know why we want this role. We know what we would like this role to do. So tapping into an agency recruiter who has that knowledge, and where I feel like, okay, we can have meaningful conversations as to say, hey, how has this perhaps been designed elsewhere? You know, what does this role do? This is what we're envisioning. Does that make sense? And having a conversation on that high level, that specialist knowledge is so key and critical. At the same time, every organization says, yeah, but we're different. So it's that marriage, ping pong, just saying it there, around how do you have actual real conversations, bringing in the full person or the fullest perspective, and using those listening skills to say, okay, maybe I went in with this pre-frame as to what this role is, but actually now having that discussion with the hiring manager, whoa, they're actually describing something completely different. Yeah, because we can never forget. How do people come up with job descriptions? They go into their ATS and say, did someone have this job before? Copy, paste.
Or they steal one off the internet, or they
they steal one off the internet. Exactly.
Back in the day, it used to be, And I think that goes back to earlier when you were saying that they want a list of all of these things, and you present them with that, and then they don't actually want that. They want, and it's like, if you don't have the conversation with them, there's just this weird fear around intakes that
so
I'm never going to understand.
One thing that I always like to work with was success profiles. What does a person need to be able to do, work with, etc., to be able to say after 1 year they've been successful in a role? Because you can use it for intake, you can use it for onboarding, you can use it for development, you can use it for all of these different things. If we get clarity around why does this position exist and why will it be a game changer for us? And so looking at kind of the success profile of, here, what industry experience, what kind of like education do they need? But even furthermore, have they been through an upswing? Have they, launched whatever? Do they have to work with a really difficult chapters around agile? And so they need some really major social skills.
Yeah. And that can work as well in terms of your kind of go-to-market narrative as well, right?
Hugely so.
Because we're finding as a team, a lot of people are like, okay, cool. That's the role now. What's it going to look like in 12, 18 months? Because then they start to understand, okay, cool. That's the role now. That's how it's going to evolve. And that's what I'm going to learn. And ultimately, that's what they're looking at is where's the growth potential for me? So it not only works internally, but externally in terms of a go-to-market narrative that can be really powerful beyond this is a job spec.
But I also think, I know you're not, because you're in startup world, so you're not quite so impacted with, obviously there are other areas that are having lots of layoffs, right? That also offers the reassurance that actually we expect this role to be around in 18 months.
Nice.
That
great point.
You're instilling the confidence by being able to confidently answer that question. And if you can't, people will be like, because we will switch more to that bit of fear. You see it every time we go into one of these weird recession, non-hiring phases, whatever we currently do. I still see lots of people getting jobs, so I still don't know what's going on in the market. Plus, don't we in the UK have something ridiculous like 4% unemployment or something? We're like, literally, we're not actually struggling to hire. Or we're struggling to hire. We're not actually, anyway, whatever. It's still going to be, there'll be a hesitancy, and you can get around it with that knowledge.
Yeah.
That was a whole load of waffle.
No, it wasn't. It was
which I think landed at my door. I heard them knock.
I think it's a really good point, Katrina, in so much as, big businesses like the big social giants that are laying off people at the moment, that influences market decisions. Other companies take their lead from those types of businesses. So it does have a domino effect. I think in the startup and scale up world, it's different, but it's not shielded from that because, ultimately these companies want to get to that scale and size and stuff like that. So they're watching and seeing if there's anything that could be relevant to them now. But I agree with you. I think if you fixate too much on that narrative, that's all you'll see. That's all you'll see. That's all you'll read. That's all you'll see. That's all that will come into your social channel.
Totally.
So I think it's really about kind of realizing that the market isn't solely dominated by the moves and changes. Of those
it isn't
businesses.
as bad as all that. I do find by putting a congratulations on all of the roles of people getting new jobs. You just see people getting new jobs, which is really quite lovely. Good point, Liz. What was the buzz term 2 months ago?
Yeah.
You need to answer, by the way, for people who aren't on Crowdcast.
Yeah.
Quiet quitting.
Quiet quitting.
I know.
Yeah. And so
By the way, if anyone wants to emulate the idiot that's bought, the incredibly successful businessman who's overspent by buying Twitter, please don't. Because your employees will just leave. They might leave right now, but they will just leave.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's that piece of, here, how are we seeing people as people rather than, you're just a workhorse and a work team. And it's like, well, depending upon how you envision what your employer means for you, it's that challenge of, we are a family, so we exploit you. Or we're a team and we're working together and collaborating with you. Yeah.
Either way, it's not the 80s anymore. Like you just
Gordon Gekko never worked.
It's never worked treating people that way. And the fact is now with the internet, with 5 billion people on the internet, people can see other jobs. They can find other people to network with. Sure, they might struggle for a bit. It might take them a bit to get a job, but they do not have to stay working for you. So,
and I think that's brilliant. And that also reinforcing to the people. You don't have to stay working for this mongrel. You really don't. You have options.
Yeah. And that's the thing, to your point around, if you buy into the narrative of the big companies that are doing the layoffs, you're like, oh my God, I need to stay where I am. You don't. There are always kind of options and opportunities.
And you can stay while you look for something else and research and get networking and, get your referred into a role. You don't have to sit, feeling like, oh my God, I'm a victim. You just don't. So stay while you've got a salary and get looking.
Yep.
So
exactly.
So thinking back to the title of the show, don't hire unless you can keep them. If I flip that for the moment into the startup space, and startups are typically a lot is determined by their runway of cash. What would your advice or guidance be to perhaps founders and co-founders that are like focusing? They're like, well, look, we can keep them as long as we have the cash, and that's a kind of known sort of thing. Whereas my view is, let's run with that. What would your advice be? We're like, well, look, we can keep them as long as we've got investment and or a cash runway. How would you? What advice, challenge, thoughts would you give to that individual or those types of individuals?
For startups in general, for particularly that, my first advice would be: don't fall in love with your product or service. Understand why does a customer's customer actually need you? And that has to be the reason why you're chasing after cash. Because there's some sort of need, there's some sort of unique selling proposition why your startup even exists. If you're just running after cash, you are not giving any thought whatsoever around the longevity or even the viability truly of your business. So for me, as maybe you have a really cool idea, don't fall in love with it until you answer, what does the user actually need from me? And how are we delivering on that? Because it's not being met elsewhere, or there's something that people are actually willing to pay for because this really fills an urgent need.
That's so cool. I love that, because it's like, don't fixate on your product or service, and don't see people as your teams as a route to fulfilling that product or service. The two are kind of completely intertwined, and those people may take your product or service in a completely different direction. So invest in them. You have a concept, you have a starting point, but don't think that that's so fixed that it can't change through the influence of bringing and investing in people that you bring into that kind of team of business.
I think the other thing as well, I think when it comes back to the recruiter's responsibility is I think there are people that understand that the startup world is a risk. But if you're taking people from perhaps another world into the startup world, be really clear with them. You understand this is a startup space. Nothing is guaranteed. They've got cash now. What happens if they don't have cash in 12 months? How will you feel? What happens if you I think we need to be doing more of that. We have a duty of care to explain to people who haven't been in the startup space. You know what? You might not have that salary in 12 months. How will you feel?
You're so right. And the thing is, it's interesting that it's so much, people know a lot more about the startup scale-up space now. They know about the fragility of it. It's not this like really exciting kind of sexy thing that everybody wants to get. People know that it's that there is an element of risk in there. And actually we're finding that a lot of people are asking about that. Okay, what's your, kind of your cash runway now, et cetera, et cetera. And some founders,
I quite like that.
Yeah, exactly. Some founders and co-founders are a little bit, well, why are people asking that? Well, actually, because they want to know how viable this particular opportunity
because
is.
they might be selling up everything in one country to move to your country.
Yes, exactly.
Start a roll, and they can't get back on the effing market. I just feel for that guy. He's never going to get his house back. Anyway, sorry, stop ranting.
But there's been numerous examples of like, kind of startups that, they're lauded as, fundraise of X and Y million, blah, blah, blah. And they just explode.
Who are they? Yeah.
What was just a couple of months ago?
Yeah, I know which one. The events one.
Way. And you know the rest. So this aspect of how were people promised like also these huge bonuses because it wasn't, it wasn't necessarily on reality as to, when people were all locked in their houses, had nothing just to do, they binge watched Netflix, they bought all sorts of things on Amazon and these other businesses when people were all in lockdown. Now people are moving back. So of course the nature of the business is going to change. How are you changing your nature of your startup or your approach so that you can really be a viable business? And I think this whole question of how are you a viable business needs to be asked much more often. I don't care if you're old school, like you've been around for 100 years. It's always, what is your approach? What's the disruptive innovation of why do you exist? And what are you offering that others don't? Okay, how are you actually delivering on that promise so that people can understand it?
And I think that's been, because we've not had a pandemic before, have we? So the companies have genuinely made mistakes. And I think I quite like that about Stripe. When they, because it was really interesting standing on stage in Sydney about 2.5 minutes after Stripe and Twitter had done their layoffs, and asking the audience, "Have you seen the emails?" And like all the hands shot up. It's like, my God, wow! Talk about employer branding screwed forever, candidate experience screwed forever, all of that employee experience. But it was Stripe hand on heart. We made a mistake, like we missed forecasts. Here are the 7 ways we're going to help our employees. That we're having to go. We're going back to our February numbers, so people felt sure, like they've gone back. They haven't gone like they know where they're at. And there are 2 mistakes made, and here are our names compared to the other lot. And it's just that, like the vulnerability and the honesty and the openness to say we made a mistake. But I think we're going to see. Unfortunately, I do think we're going to see a bit more of it because it's still rippling across the world. You sort of see companies who perhaps have only come out of lockdown more recently, and then people go into a spending spree because perhaps they haven't done the online shopping, the cash. Now they're out spending it, but it's going to plateau again. And it's hard. It is hard for businesses, but I think there just needs to be a bit more vulnerability and a bit more honesty,
Hugely so, because people are willing to accept it. This is the thing of like, treat me face value as a human and as an adult, and I will deal with that information accordingly. If you deal with me like a number or a child, I feel disrespected and devalued. If I feel disrespected and devalued, well, I'm going to keep you digging your hole deeper because I don't see any value in you. So yeah, exactly.
Good luck with future hiring there.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
With the devil's horn laugh.
I was just thinking like, in terms of when the conversation starts around kind of hiring and at what point sometimes, chief people officer, head of HR, talent acquisition, recruitment actually enter that conversation. And I just wonder whether to your point around kind of like recruiters, once the job spec or the job's been signed off, et cetera, is that too late for that conversation to be had around, the kind of pathway and navigation of the role and the person in that role? Do you think that there should be, a people representative, talent HR, whatever, earlier in the process?
A chief talent navigator? Yes, hands.
Is available for hire at elizabethmk.com. Or whatever your correct website is.
Because, it's like you have different options. Like I said, here, like, what are we binding? What are we building? What are we borrowing? What are we, getting rid of? Because this is also something nobody really talks about. It's like, If these roles are no longer relevant, what do we do with them? But there's a person in it. Well, yeah, but a person has different abilities and potential. How are we looking to move people into new or different roles because the roles are becoming redundant because the business has moved on beyond that particular role? This is absolutely, in my opinion, the core job of HR and talent is to be looking at what do we have as staff? Where are we going in our strategic plan? What's our financial ability? And here, how do we actually navigate those different waters so that we understand exactly what we're doing within each one of those buckets?
Yeah.
Because it is crazy, isn't it? You see these firms and they're like laying off over here and they're hiring over here.
Yeah.
And we had Tracy Parsons on, and she's got Work Drive, which is a brilliant tool for anyone wanting to see, like, to map across their company, but also people can apply for jobs anonymously within the company. So you get far more feedback.
Awesome. Yeah.
But she was talking about exactly that. Like, it shouldn't be happening. You know, once somebody's been in your company, they have IP, they have learned stuff about your company, they can learn other stuff and move on into other areas. We should be going there first. It's crazy.
So I used to be an archaeologist, you know.
Obviously.
You know, it's like we learn new skills, you know, it is possible.
No wonder you're so good at sourcing.
Exactly.
Is it on a like a practical level? Is there a kind of exercise that you would advise kind of businesses? So when they're doing the kind of strategic plan for the next 12, 18, 24 months, and then they start to think, these are the people we need to get to those set of goals. This may seem naive, but do they also think, okay, once we've got to that goal, where is that person going to be at the end of that journey as well? Is there an exercise like that? So it's kind of like, okay, we've met our 24-month strategic goal, yay! But do they default to, okay, so we hired this person at this point. What skills and experience have they got at that point where we've achieved our goals, and what does that mean for them going forward? Is that even a thing? I don't know.
Glenn,
No.
I love you because this is what, you know, I was a talent manager and a talent director with like so much passion and love for exactly that question. Because we have to. And in my opinion, this is where talent management, where people consider it for dinosaurs, completely fails, because that is the role of a talent manager, is to manage the talent across our strategic roadmap, our product roadmap, our financials, and say, okay, here, what are those skills? You know, we've been talking a lot about skill development rather than, because everyone hates the word competencies. I don't freaking care. It's at the end of the day, it's like, because we had a lot of people who would come back from expat assignments like, oh, what are we going to do with them? Well, did we not know like 3 to 5 years that we were sending them on an expat? Maybe some good plans would be nice to have in place. Yeah. And so this is that aspect of what do you understand your role of is, you know, and yes, more naturally, it would be the talent manager's type of role to do this. But a recruiter, learning and development, et cetera, they should be asking these questions as well, because how else do we prepare our workforce for the jobs that are now and also the jobs that are coming up? If we're not asking those questions, how in the world can we be effective? I don't get it.
Yeah. Because surely, like all good goal setting, right? Once you know, kind of, so case in point, person A joins as an analyst, 2 years, they've accumulated experience to be a senior or a lead, all in theory should be. Yeah. Okay, so that means that we can map the points where we feel they need training and development and talk to them about that. And then equally, once we're at this kind of 24-month period, we've got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about in terms of what the next 12 months look like, etc. And it's not talent mapping for the purpose of fulfilling a business strategic need. It's talent mapping to help that person grow. And the net benefit for the business is there to see, right? It's their input and retention, right?
Yeah,
it's kind of like key thing.
And keeping them engaged, because people are looking at work, they're looking for fulfillment. They say, okay, what's the impact? What's the relationships I get to have at work? And how am I growing? And if I have those things, and particularly if I feel like, okay, here I belong and I can make that movement happen. If those 4 things are in place, you're going to have an amazing bench of people who are interested, curious, and connected, which makes your business stronger.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that gets forgotten.
What would you say to those companies who are now going, oh God, we're in a cost of living crisis and we're in a recession and we're in a buzzword bingo is happening at the moment, which is negative, who are about to cut their learning spend and their development spend? What would you say to them? Because I'm already seeing it. I mean, some of them can't even buy my freaking book. I mean, Jesus, like, come on, because they can't. It's just madness.
The first thing always to get cut is training. It always, I mean, goodness gracious. I mean, any business I in is like, oh, knocks that.
Develop our people.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, yeah, you can do that, but you're also sending a message each and every time you say your development isn't important to us as this thing. So, for me, one of the things that we would do is, here, what are your value streams? How are you actually working on the things that matter rather than just going for the quick and easy, quick and dirty, which has a lot of implications to your point around employer branding of, are we truly important to you? And I think, here, this is also where L&D has to be asking themselves questions around how are we really understanding what is their work now? How are we helping through experience design, et cetera, to create really meaningful, where people say, I understand why we really need L&D. So I used to be responsible for career growth for L&D Cares. And that was one of the biggest things is we don't just deliver training similar to like recruiters. We don't just deliver candidates. That's something that people can see and maybe they associate with it, but our work is actually quite different. And our understanding of who we are within that has to be understood by ourselves before we can actually engage with others as to what's the value we bring to the business.
Yeah. That reminds me of sorry, it's a little off tangent, but it's so annoying. I can't remember the name of the speaker, but they were talking, but because it goes back to the branding piece and future hiring and all this sort of stuff. And this company knee-jerk reacted and fired 50% of their engineers, and it took them 5 years to recover from that. 5 years to be able to get their engineers numbers back where they needed them because they all talked. And it's the same thing. So if you're cutting that investment in your people, they're all talking.
What we tell people they're not supposed to talk about their conversation. They're not supposed to go to Glassdoor. They're not supposed to go to Reddit.
Oh,
what they do that? I'm so
Reddit's the best one.
So shocked.
Yeah,
I know. And they talk in the pub too. They talk.
They go to events.
And they talk.
Well, and look to these different, to, kind of follow up on one of the original questions of what are those development for, engineers or your specialists. Oftentimes they're a little bit more risk shy. So, and they also know their value. So if we mess with them, they're going to mess with us. So this aspect of like, how are you treating your people fairly, honestly, and openly and constructively? It so matters. And so these quick, like, oh, well, that's a quick line item we can just take off.
I don't have to pay now.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting how very quickly companies think about what's urgent and required and what's a nice to have. And that was illustrated in the kind of pandemic, right? So case in point, the same example or similar to what Katrina just said, companies in the UK slashed their sales team. Not necessarily now because the market's not there for it. Bye-bye. And now they're hiring back that talent at a premium, at a massive premium. And you just kind of think to yourself, how short-sighted is that? You're saying to these individuals,
TA teams right now as well.
You are not necessary. You are only necessary if the market is there. You're just like, man, that is a wrong message to be sending. Sorry.
Yeah, you're completely right. And
it's post while you're talking.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is perhaps to that point of recruiters, it was during the pandemic where it's like, okay, well, they're not hiring. Well, what are they doing also internally? Here we cut so many of these key positions. So how are they keeping those bonds open? So there were a lot of things that internal recruiters could be doing to, that really help support the viability of the overall business. But it's exactly to your point. It's like, do you see these only as transactional, like, sales? No sales are happening, therefore no sales needed. Rather than people don't like being sold to. They need, sales is all about relationship building and understanding the problem and how do we find a solution that works, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not just schmoozing.
I was just
Totally.
thinking,
And because it's happening to TA teams right now, I just want to interrupt and read you this one. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but Chris Mannion, which is Mannion, put out a post, so go find it. But he was talking about recruiter layoffs, and I just love this. So assume an all-in compensation for senior recruiters on $120,000 a year or $10,000 a month. And you could obviously lay them off at $10,000 a month, but cost to rebuild that recruiting position, agency placement fee, say $24K, so 20% of the first year. Ramp time at 50% productivity is 90 days. So one fewer hire per month equals $31K opportunity cost for a gapped role. And then the total cost already is at $55K. And then he talks about like all the ways that they could be doing other stuff, like improving the employer brand, updating internal material, pruning and building a talent community, creating mobility, implementing recruiting analytics, and on it goes. It's an absolutely brilliant post. So go find it. Yes. Quite liked it.
Brilliant.
See, give credit. If you share
Yeah,
the
credit.
give credit.
Credit
Just
to
say,
you.
Credit where credit is
at the
due.
moment.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm kind of thinking now, December.
Oh, is that what
end
that
of
Ooh,
the
that's
year.
nice. I'm going to try
Yeah.
that one.
I'm
I know, we
thinking,
can't.
yeah. And it's kind of December. We're looking at 2023, Liz. Any big predictions for 2023 in terms of people, talent, HR? anything along
Buzzwords.
those lines?
Buzzwords. What will we
No,
have?
no,
I've started
We've
to
had
read
mass
stuff.
layoffs.
I've started to read stuff about 2023 already, and I'm just
I
fascinated
would
by
love
some of the.
to hear from you because, like, honestly, I called 2022 a maze because it felt like we were in a little bit of a labyrinth.
Oh, I like that.
And truly, I feel like it really was a maze.
Yeah.
So as we're looking
Sorry, it's
into
not over yet. I'm just letting you know it's the 7th of December. Just
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for many businesses, they're like, "Oh, December's already here." Yeah.
Well, I think
because they're in a maze.
Yes, exactly. They're in the maze.
I think there's
The Horcrux is there.
yeah. I think in terms of 2023, there's the usual suspects that are always there. How will AI continue to change the recruitment hiring landscape? People analytics is another one that's kind of, and I feel like these have kind of been repeated year on year for
What Glenn,
a
are you
while.
saying? Digital transformation, was that another one that you were looking for?
Don't you just love digital transformation?
Okay, I'm just going to say though, don't you think that we have gone so far down that path? We actually need to get back to basics, because I actually think that's what next year is going to be. What we have been talking about is the impact we have on humans' lives, and the fact that when we base stuff on the quick win / cost, or we try and digitize, we get too far away from developing the human beings, and it's the humans making the company succeed. So I personally, that's my hope. I know what I'll be focusing on. My focus will be on intakes and getting recruiters to do better, like that human conversation.
For me, one of those, I love that, because that humanness, and this is for me when I was working on workplace dignity, as opposed to D&I, what are those things? This is, again, we're transactional. It's like, how are humans treated with dignity and respect at work? If that's not the foundation of how we collaborate, what is? So this aspect of how are we having courage for and with one another? And then as we look to develop people, how are we continuing to build their confidence while they're building their competence? And those are for me.
I think communication is a huge problem now.
Huge.
The number of ways we can, like these things within reach, and then we just ignore people and don't respond. And, we've forgotten how to, I like that dignity, have that respect for other people and the kindness and the.
Because everybody talks about kind of solutions, platforms, etc. Why is it not hiring should just be a human-centered experience, as opposed to a solution or a platform play or
someone wrote a whole book
efficiencies,
she wrote a
etc.
second edition.
But it's about, and I think to that point, you can have a kind of a process that somebody goes through. Which could be super efficient for them, etc. But is it an experience?
Yep.
And the experience is the piece that's actually going to really, I think, draw them closer to and feel like they're really aligned to that opportunity and company, as opposed to just a process that's quite efficient, that is less time consuming. Because I think there's this big focus on, can we make hiring more efficient, less time consuming, reach more people, narrow the talent pool down, less kind of time for hiring managers to have to kind of dedicate to the process, etc. But there's that piece around what is the experience for everybody involved in that hiring? And you know, it's
everybody involved in that hiring.
I couldn't
Everybody
agree
involved.
more, because it's like, I like to say the nail biting moments that matter, how are we designing for them and how are we delivering on them? Because I think one of the worst things that we've done with Taylor is this operational efficiency, because efficiency is not effectiveness. You can be hugely efficient doing exactly the wrong thing, but you have great numbers. Well, if it's not what we need to be doing, well, then I'm sorry, but that's a total waste. That's total muda. So
we were super fast hiring that person, but they were shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, but to your point, Katrina, we could be super fast at getting somebody to offer stage, and then they reject the offer because they thought the experience was crap, or they didn't really understand the business or the role.
Because those recruiters didn't read that book that we were just talking about.
Exactly.
Human
What is that? Robot proof recruiter second edition?
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that.
That one. There.
I think
Not the purple one, people. Buy the orange one.
Yeah. And
people are still buying the old one. I don't know why.
Original, right? Might be worth something at an
auction.
But
it's like some of it's out of date. Get the second one.
But at the same token, it's kind of like it's that hiring experience for everybody, not just candidate experience.
Yeah.
Not just hiring. It's because it's all interconnected. If you separate it out, you're kind of okay. Fine, I can understand. That's a process separation. But the experience is a collective thing.
Imagine if we started with a better intake experience, but the whole lot would be impacted. If we made it much more human-centered from that moment, the whole lot would be better.
Yeah.
SLAs, boundaries, you know, how are we gonna communicate with each other?
Yeah, some fundamentals.
Hiring managers don't want to use your freaking ATS, people. Right.
Well, the other thing to that point,
you might want to Twitter DM you at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night. It's probably not in your ATS.
Well, this is the thing. It's like technology should work for people. People should not be working for technology. And, you know, to your point, Glenn, about AI, what is that role in recruiting, et cetera? We use tools that help make our jobs easier. If they don't, then we're frustrated and we waste a lot of time with sucky tools.
There are lots of sucky asked tools out there. I'm going back to the link. How did you say it again? The LinkedIn. No, sorry, I shouldn't say that. We're actually live on LinkedIn at this precise moment. So
LinkedIn.
Sucky asked tool. Mind you, I have really enjoyed, you know, the fact there are 5 billion people on the internet, and you know, far fewer than 1/5 of those are on LinkedIn. Anyone tuning in on LinkedIn and using it as your only source of hire? Just a thought.
So actually, here's a little one.
I've been trying to throw that out as many times as possible lately.
Yeah, is a little one from our pal Clive Smart.
I love Clive.
Cool. And he pinged a post today. It was like, hiring tip for today: pick up the phone. Now, that may sound a bit old school, but he was like, look, and I think Gareth actually chipped in, Gareth Peterson, and he was like, look, in terms of recent research shows 81% of candidates prefer to be reached by phone or email in that order over LinkedIn emails, yet the same number, 81% of recruiters default to email. Know your audience. Thanks, Clive. Thanks, Gareth.
Well, if you ring somebody and they answer their phone, they're giving you permission to speak. I know it's really hard for some of you to understand. Perhaps you're a bit younger and you don't remember how a phone was used, but that's what happens. It rings and people answer it, which gives you permission to speak. And then you're very respectful. What was it used? Integrity? No, it wasn't integrity. You used another word earlier, Liz. But that, you know, just exactly be kind. Dignity.
Absolutely.
Be aware.
People connect with other people. If I don't feel a connection with you, I'm not going to be interested in your role. So if you're coming at me just because it's efficient, it may not be effective.
It may not be. Well, that is the perfect note to end with. Liz, thank you as ever. Amazing.
Thank you, Liz.
Awesome. I love this. Thank you.
We will be back in 2 weeks, even though it's just about that festive season. I'll be politically correct and not call it the other word. With Mr. Jerry Crispin, who's an interesting way to end the year. I forgot the topic. What was the topic? We're going to be talking about radical transparency. That seems like the perfect way to end the year, actually. Nice. So I'm looking forward to that.
Feeling that.
Thank you as ever. If people want to get in touch with you, Liz, what is the best way?
Per Glenn, say it.
LinkedIn.
You've lost a D in there. There was an extra D a minute ago. LinkedIn.
Yeah, probably LinkedIn is the best way. Yeah, exactly. Cool. Otherwise, transformingtalent.co or .de. So, yeah.
Amazing. Cool. .co, very trendy. Thank you again. So we'll
Thanks,
get you
Liz.
back next time with your devils on your head.
Exactly.
Brilliant. Thanks everybody for